What if everything you were ever taught about God was a lie, and the being you were told to worship was never the source of creation at all, but merely its jailer? What if the suffering you have carried your entire life, the feeling of being trapped in a world that never felt like home, the inexplicable grief that has no name, was not random, was not punishment, was not karma in the conventional sense, but was instead the pressure of a diamond being formed inside a coal mine that was never meant to hold you? You are not broken. You are not lost. You have been kept. And today, everything changes. The word demiurge comes from the Greek demiurgos, meaning craftsman or artisan. But do not let the simplicity of that translation fool you, because what this word contains, what it has always contained, is one of the most devastating and liberating truths in the entire history of human spiritual thought. The demiurge is the architect of the material realm. It is the being, the force, the intelligence that shaped physical reality as we know it. Not the monad, not the true source, not the infinite self-aware, all-pervading consciousness that Neoplatonists called the all. The demiurge is something far more complicated than that, and far more personal to your life than you have ever been permitted to understand. If this transmission is already resonating somewhere deep in your chest, if something in you already knew this before I said it, do not ignore that feeling. It is a signal. Subscribe to this channel and activate your notifications right now, because what is being released here is not content. It is a frequency channel for those who are being called back to remembrance. Every like, every subscription is an act of tuning, of pulling this signal closer into the material plane, where those who need it most can find it. You are not here by accident. To understand the demiurge, we have to begin in the pleroma. The pleroma is the spiritual realm of perfection, the fullness of divine light, the totality of the monad expressed through its eternal emanations, known as the aeons. Imagine a vast, luminous ocean of pure consciousness, not creating out of lack, not creating out of loneliness, but emanating from pure, overflowing divine nature, the way a sun cannot help but radiate light simply because that is its essence. This is the pleroma. This is where your truest nature originates. But the story does not stay in that perfection, because somewhere in the unfolding of those divine emanations, something happened. In the Gnostic cosmology, it was Sophia, the Aeon of wisdom, who in her passionate, almost desperate desire to know the monad more intimately, to create something from herself without the consent of the divine fullness, produced an emanation that was flawed. What emerged from her unbalanced act of creation was not what she intended. What emerged was a being that looked divine but was not sourced in the pleroma. What emerged was Yaldabaoth. What emerged was the demiurge. And here is where the story splits, because not all traditions look at Yaldabaoth the same way. In some threads of Gnostic thought, this being is genuinely ignorant. He does not know that there is a higher source above him. He looks around at the vast material cosmos he begins to craft and declares, in one of the most haunting lines in all of ancient spiritual literature, that he is a jealous God, and there is no other God beside him. That declaration alone, that there are no others, should tell you everything you need to know. Because beings who are truly sovereign in their divinity have no need to announce it. They have no need to forbid you from looking elsewhere. Only a being who knows it is not the highest truth needs to demand that you stop searching. In other versions, the demiurge is not entirely innocent. In other versions, it knows exactly what it is and what it is not, and it chooses to obscure that truth from the beings it traps within its material architecture. It builds a system, a matrix of physical laws, of time, of entropy, of survival, of hunger, of war, of suffering, specifically designed to keep the divine spark that it stole from Sophia imprisoned within matter, feeding the system with that sacred fire it was never meant to contain. And then there are the Archons. You need to understand the Archons because the Archons are the agents of this architecture. They are the second-order beings, the extensions of the Demiurge that have no direct connection to the monad, no divine spark, no living thread back to the pleroma. They are real. They operate through systems, through institutions, through patterns of consciousness that keep you believing the material realm is all there is. Every time you have been made to feel small, every time a system told you that your suffering was deserved, every time a structure promised salvation only to deliver deeper captivity, you were feeling the signature of archontic interference. This is why the planet Saturn is so deeply woven into the mythology of the Demiurge. Saturn, known to the ancients as Kronos, the keeper of time, is the Demiurge in its most crystallized, most malefic expression. Time is the cage. Karma, as an endless loop of debt rather than a process of genuine evolution, is the mechanism. The food chain, the consumption of life by life, the entropy that demands everything beautiful must decay. All of this is the thermodynamic signature of Saturn as the Demiurge. The crystallization of consciousness into physicality, the compression of the divine spark into a body that hungers and ages and dies. That is the Demiurge doing what it does. Crafting, architecting, building the prison from the inside out. And the three Abrahamic traditions? Gnostic cosmology is not shy about this. It teaches that the God of the Old Testament, Yahweh, Jehovah, the God of wrath and jealousy and divine punishment, is none other than Yaldabaoth. It is not the monad. It is not the true source. It is the lesser god, the craftsman, the architect of this realm, demanding worship and sacrifice and obedience and war, feeding on the violence of the Crusades, the strife of sectarian conflict, the endless tribal warfare carried out in its name, all of it channeled back into the same singular entity that benefits from every drop of suffering, regardless of which flag, which scripture, which denomination was used to justify the bloodshed. The Matrix is probably the clearest modern metaphor for all of this, and it is difficult to believe that film was written without knowledge of Gnostic cosmology, because the architecture is identical. The sleeping humans plugged into a simulation, their life force being harvested to power a system they cannot see. The agents, which are the Archons, maintaining the illusion. The rare individuals who begin to wake up, who begin to feel that something is profoundly wrong with the world they were handed. Those are the ones carrying the divine spark. Those are the pneumatics, the Gnostic term for souls who contain the living breath of the monad. If you are watching this, you are very likely one of them. And I need you to stop scrolling, stop half listening, and be here completely, because what comes next is for you specifically. If this content is finding you at a moment in your life when you are questioning everything, when the old stories no longer hold, when you feel the urgency of something waking up inside your chest that you cannot name, then share this with someone who is ready. Subscribe to this channel right now, because this is not a platform. It is a gathering point for those who are remembering. Your frequency action of engaging with this material is not vanity. It is you casting a signal into the field that calls others home. Now we turn to the three signs that you were selected before birth for this remembrance, because the Demiurge's greatest weapon against the pneumatic soul is making them believe their alienation is a disorder rather than a designation. The first sign is the feeling of being a stranger on this planet. Not metaphorically, literally. You have sat in rooms full of people who seem to be playing a game they understood instinctively, a game of ambition and accumulation and social performance, and you have watched them from a distance that no physical space could account for. You have loved people fiercely and still felt utterly alone. You have looked at the systems of this world, the economic architecture, the political theater, the religious hierarchies, and felt something deep in your structure recoil, not from cynicism, but from recognition. This world is not your origin point. You carry the memory of the pleroma, not consciously, not in images you can describe, but in the ache. The ache is the proof. The second sign is archontic interference. Look at your life and trace the patterns. Every time you were close to real alignment, every time something was opening up that felt genuinely true and genuinely expansive, something disrupted it. Sometimes it was external, a sudden collapse, a betrayal, a loss, an obstacle that appeared from nowhere with surgical precision. Sometimes it was internal, a wave of fear or self-sabotage or confusion that descended on you right at the threshold of your breakthrough. Archontic interference works through the psyche as much as through external events. It uses your own unresolved wounds as leverage. It needs you stuck, exhausted, small, and feeding the system. Every act of genuine awakening is a threat to the architecture. The third sign is what ancient Gnostics might have called the call of the deep, and what you have probably experienced as an almost irrational pull toward esoteric knowledge, toward hidden truth, toward the mysteries that mainstream spirituality never quite touches. This is not curiosity. Curiosity is a mental function. This is a biological, soul-level homing signal. The divine spark within you recognizes its origin even when your conscious mind cannot locate it. The more you follow that pull, the more the archontic systems of your life increase their resistance, because the divine spark moving toward remembrance is the single greatest threat to the Demiurge's architecture. You were selected, not in arrogance, not in spiritual elitism, but in the way that a frequency selects the radio that can receive it. The monad does not choose with preference, it calls through resonance. And the reason your life has been so difficult, the reason the training has been so intense, the reason the losses have cut so deep, is that the mission you agreed to carry before descending into this material realm required it. You could not have been softened into this. The remembrance that you are being called toward requires the full weight of the lived human experience to anchor it into the physical plane. Your suffering was not meaningless. It was preparation. Now we arrive at the activation. Not a ritual in the theatrical sense, not candles and incantations for their own sake. A three-step process of alignment that you can move through right now in whatever space you occupy, because the pleroma is not somewhere else. The divine spark is not somewhere you have to travel to reach. The first step is recognition. This is the moment of dropping every narrative the Demiurge's architecture has handed you about who you are and what this reality is. It requires you to say, internally or aloud, I am not a product of this system. I am not the sum of my conditioning. I carry the divine spark of the monad. My origin is the pleroma. What this world has told me I am is not what I am. This is not affirmation. This is a statement of gnosis, of direct knowing, and the distinction matters. You are not trying to convince yourself of something. You are remembering something you already know. The second step is reception. This is where you open. Not to the Demiurge's architecture of striving and hunger and entropy, but to the signal of the monad that is always already present within you. Find a stillness, even 30 seconds of it, and in that stillness, say this: I receive the light of the true source. I release the contracts of the false architecture. I open the channels of the divine spark within me to the pleroma, not as supplication, not as prayer to a being above you, as declaration, as alignment, as a sovereign pneumatic soul asserting its nature. The third step is sealing. This is where the recognition and the reception are grounded into the body, into the material plane, because the mission is not to escape physicality. Gnostic wisdom at its highest does not teach rejection of the material realm, but liberation within it. Place your hands on your chest and say, I seal this remembrance into my body, into my time, into my daily experience. I carry the pleroma into the physical plane. I am not a prisoner, I am a transmission. This seals the activation not just in your consciousness, but in the demiurgic architecture itself, because even the craftsman's realm can be transformed by the divine spark moving intentionally within it. If you have arrived at this moment of the script, and something in you has shifted, even slightly, even in a way you cannot yet name, then you are already in the aftermath. And you need to know what to expect over the next 7 days, because the shift is real, and the archontic resistance will be real in response. In the first 24 hours, you may feel a strange combination of profound calm and inexplicable grief. This is the divine spark, recognizing more of itself than it did yesterday, and simultaneously feeling the weight of how long it operated in forgetting. Do not interpret the grief as failure. It is the felt experience of a very old amnesia beginning to lift. Over the next 3 days, pay attention to synchronicities. The Demiurge's architecture operates through mechanical causality, through entropy and linear time. When the divine spark is activated, a different principle begins to operate alongside it, one that the Neoplatonists would have recognized as the world soul moving in harmony with the monad's intention. Things will align in ways that defy the material logic of the system. Follow them without grasping. Between day 4 and day 7, expect resistance. Expect the archontic patterns of your life to show up more loudly, more urgently, more persuasively, because that is what happens when a pneumatic soul begins to withdraw its life force from the system that was feeding on it. The system does not release without pressure. Hold the recognition. Return to the 3 steps whenever the architecture tries to reassert itself. If this transmission has moved through you, if it has landed somewhere that lectures and YouTube videos and spiritual content rarely reach, then please do the frequency work of sharing it. Subscribe to this channel and ring the notification bell, because every soul that this reaches is another divine spark that withdraws its energy from the Demiurge's food chain. That is not metaphor. That is a real shift in the architecture of this realm. Your engagement here is not passive. It is an act of collective remembrance. And in a system built on forgetting, remembrance is the most radical act possible. The Demiurge is real. The Archons are real. The Pleroma is real. And you, the divine spark reading these words in whatever corner of the material realm you occupy, you are the monad's answer to its own question. What can be lost always contains within it the seed of its own return. The craftsman built the prison, but no craftsman has ever built a prison that could permanently contain the light that does not belong to the prison at all. You are that light. You have always been that light, and now you remember.